All right, everyone. In the last videos, we sort of kind of began meandering through our file system and taking a look at the different, some of the different ways our new application is going to be structured and work. So from here on out, though, I want to go back a little bit more towards step-by-step writing it out, like what we're trying to accomplish each time. So we're going to start being a little bit more goal-oriented now. Generally speaking, the whole generated boilerplate is a really just a great way to learn about the core features of any sort of Meteor application. Really, we've got all the big stuff in here. We've got, routing, publish and subscribe, security, pagination, all the most important things you'd need in any sort of professional grade application. So generally, if you're ever like, oh, I don't really know what I should do right now, or I want to get better, right? But maybe you want to get better at, the Meteor and not the Code Academy, not the JavaScript as much. Just like making sure you understand every line of code in the collection generator, for example, will teach you 90% of the most important things you need to know about building your application. So previously, we sort of looked at some of the different files and stuff, but I kind of want to recap what we'll normally want to do. So let's say, the first thing we do is we would generate our app. Right? That would be the first thing we do to make a new project. The next thing we probably want to do is generate a new collection. And we're going to get a couple things with this. So let's break those out. So the first thing we'll get when we generate a new collection, we are going to get this collections folder. And the collections folder has all of the reusable components across our app. So, I call them components for lack of a better word here, but components could be templates, the global, if we're making a collection of posts, for example, the global posts object that we could interact with. The quick form things that we might want to reuse in multiple spots throughout our app. All of those could be the different components, right? So the first thing we get is that collections folder. The next thing we get after this is our pages folder, which has top level templates with unique URLs. So if you recall my definition of what a page is from the previous video, a page is a template that takes up, exactly what it sounds like. It takes up the whole page of the app, and it has its own unique URL. So if someone pastes that URL into their browser window, they will be taken to see that page right off the bat. From there, the first thing, and by the way, this is something I maybe should have clarified in the last video, but there's a term for what this kind of a structure is, where you have like collections and pages and these different folders. We'll actually put it down here. Surprise vocab. Vocabulary is going to be separation of concerns. Separation of concerns is exactly what it sounds like. Different parts of your app that are concerned with different pieces of functionality should be separated from one another, right? You want to separate different pieces of functionality in your app because it helps keep you sane. If you think about how massive an app like say Facebook is, for example, there would be, you know, it would be impossible to wrap. No one at Facebook knows every line of code in the entire system at Facebook, right? Or I'd be really surprised if someone did. They may get from a high level overview or like a general understanding, but I doubt they know the nitty gritty of how every single function they've ever created works. So the, you know, there's definitely like a messaging department and like a status update department and like a profile department. And, you know, maybe I shouldn't say it as a department, but they're kind of built like they're their own mini apps, right? And so you need to do the same thing when you're making your app. You know, some people have come up to me and they're like, well, I'm not sure what to do. I'm not sure how to keep building on my main app. But they have all these like side little things they know to figure out. And so something I've tried to say to people in the class is, well, why don't you go make a new Meteor app and just try to get the one thing that you're not quite understanding working in a standalone Meteor app, right? And then later reintegrate it into your project. You know, don't stop trying to think of every piece of your program as this, you know, this like flat canvas where as soon as you start adding ink to the page, it sort of like changes the whole thing, you know. I mean, that's kind of a weak metaphor, but it's the best I can come up with on the spot. You know, think of your app as really just like an accumulation of multiple mini apps, right? And those things are really just accumulations of like unique functions and stuff, right? And each function is its own little box, right? I mean, this is kind of, you know, let's say you're in the code base, right? And you're trying to, you know, you've got like a JavaScript file and then you got like a template and it open in another window. And so you're like looking at these two things that are related to one another. Are you thinking about, let's say you're messing around with like the if is owner helper right here, right? So you're trying to program this, you know, this one function. Are you thinking about, you know, even this thing up here? Are you really thinking about like what URL, for example, this page is going to be? No. And in WebStorm, if you actually go to the little minus signs on the left of the editor here, you can actually minimize that functionality. You can say, I don't care about you right now. Just go out of my mind, right? And this is kind of what I've talked about, where being a programmer is about flying at 5, 50, and, you know, 5,000 feet, right? You need to be able to sort of have these different operating ranges when you're thinking about the nature of these problems. And a lot of times, beginning programmers tend to just want to always fly at 5,000 feet, right? They always are like really hyper obsessed with understanding like the big picture and how all these things are tying together and like where is it all going and stuff, right? And you kind of need to really, you just need to stop doing that, because it's not really beneficial to you to, like, it's an important thing you need to be able to do, but you can't do that exclusively, right? Like when I'm trying to program this if is owner functionality, I'm literally only thinking about this block of HTML and this helper function right here. Like the rest of the app is not in my mind while I'm getting this one thing working, right? Because I could pull this out into its own Meteor app and play around with it to test it just to see if it was working the way I wanted it to, right? And that is what separations of concerns really is, right? And why we have so many freaking files and folders in our project, because it keeps us sane if you can zero in on relatively like self-contained pieces of functionality and not need to think about how it's tying into the larger, you know, like soup of your program, right? So I know I've spent a lot of time on this concept throughout the last couple of videos, but this is pretty important. And the sooner you understand this, the sooner programming is just going to become a lot easier for you, right? Because this is the thing that's going to hose you after the program is over, right? When you're like, well, you know, I don't have regular class with Wesley to tell me how I'm going to, you know, I need to add this one button. I can't even begin to visualize like how it ties into all this stuff, you know, right? Like that's, you know, so if you start training your mind to think about more of these like Lego pieces that snap together, That's how you really get good enough to start being able to create things independently of needing someone like really inside your app with you. Okay, so separation of concerns. If I talk about that anymore, I'll you know what? Actually, just to drive this home, let's do something. So there are two small errors in the boilerplate that you've been given that we need to fix because they violate this idea of the separation of concerns. So the first one here, so just, I'm going to close this stuff. So first one is open up the edit cat page.html. So for me, it's cats. That's what my collection was. So it's whatever it is for you guys. Open up your edit page, and you'll notice here in the edit page, we have sort of this like that quick form line, right? This is where we're yielding in the quick form of our for our collection, right? But this whole line has like a lot of custom stuff, and it's a bit wonky with how it's written out. And it's a lot to remember where we put this. Furthermore, we probably want to reuse this thing, right? And we don't want to have to like type out collection cats, ID update cat, type update, over and over again. Well, where this was supposed to have gone, and this is just through a mistake in the boilerplate, go back to your templates and open up your update cat template. You'll notice right here that's commented out is that same quick form template. So this is the way it's really supposed to be. So comment it back in. And now, I'll just put these side by side. But now, in the edit cat page, here on the left, delete that line, and we're going to yield in update cat. Okay, so what just happened? Well, we took one of the templates at our collection level, right? So it's a reusable component. It's not at the page level. It's reusable. And we took that and then put it inside of another template called update cat. And now anywhere in our program that we want to use this really long quick form line, we can just say update cat. So we just built a little tool for ourselves to make our life easier, right? Now instead of having to think about all the crazy quick form syntax, we just need to remember, yield an update cat, and that will work. So doing that, that's going to, sorry, let me just see something. So really quick, one more thing we have to fix. This shouldn't be document over here on the right. This should be this. I'm going to, we'll go more into detail about using this context in the future. But getting back to the point I was originally trying to make though, I just want to make sure we got that fix in there because that will break your program. So definitely make sure you change that. So now we can reuse this update cat, like this little, this is a Lego piece we have right now, right? This yield right here. We can take that and we can just use that across multiple pages in our app. Furthermore, all this crazy stuff down here, which is more associated with the collection level stuff, right? It's happening globally for all the collection related stuff. That is now in the correct place, based off our definition of how we're separating these concerns, right? And then we're pulling that in at the page level, right? So that was kind of a little bit how I built this whole thing, and the other ones worked correctly. That was just, I was just playing around with stuff, and I kind of messed it up a little bit. So if you fix that, we just did one thing to make our separation of concerns a bit better in our app, right? And more consistent. So go ahead and close out of those. And the next thing we are going to do is we're going to fix one other problem. So I'm going to open the You know what? Actually, sorry, I just changed my mind. To fix this small separation of concerns improvement, we need to know a little bit more about how routing works in our program. So I'll actually come back and we'll fix this in a later video. So just to wrap up, this whole time, we were just really going over, what is separation of concerns? How do you think about your app? How do you break it apart into these tiny modular reusable pieces? And how that makes us happy programmers. So I know I put a lot of emphasis on that concept, but it is pretty foreign because the reality is that learning to code, unlike learning a foreign language, when you learn a foreign language, you have some basis about how the structure and logic of the language works. I mean, even if you're learning Mandarin, right? There's still like the kinds of things you want to describe still more or less make sense in the context of how you've spoken languages before, right? But when you're trying to write code, what you're trying to describe is fundamentally different. You're saying, well, move this data here. Now, when these conditions are true, apply. It's very different from a spoken language. So not only are you learning this new syntax, you're having to learn really how to think like a computer. I mean, I've said this a couple times before, but learning how to code is really just learning how to translate English into machine language, right? And so separation of concerns and modular design is one of your most powerful tools in your arsenal when you're trying to, think like the machine. So now we've talked about like separation of concerns and stuff. I'm actually just going to remove this. So just to go over again, so we've made our app. We've now generated a new collection. The next thing we want to do is we are probably going to change our schema. So just to refresh, if you're looking for the schema, it's under your collections folder in your app. It's then under the code folder under lib. We haven't gone into what lib is yet, but we'll leave it there for now. And from there, right here in the middle of all these comments and stuff, is your schema. This is like a normal schema that you can just do all the stuff you've done with AutoForm before. But to make things a bit easier now, we've got these Orion attributes. Don't worry too much about what Orion is. It's basically just a third-party library we're using to help manage some of these features. But you'll notice here we can put like images, or we can say, put this like rich text editor in there, or we can have created by, created at, updated at. We can have these additional attributes on our objects that are made to be easier for us to use. So the third thing you'll probably do is you'll want to change that schema. Now, depending upon the structure of your app, let me actually add a new desktop here. So depending upon the structure of your app, you are probably, you may or may not be happy with the default, let me just start my app here, with the default page structure that I've come up with. All right. Okay, so let me just load up our app. So I'm talking about this URL structure right here, how we kind of navigate through our app and change different things. For now, we'll leave that be, and we'll talk about creating custom pages at a later point in the future. But I still really just want to drive all the pieces of these collections home. So we've changed our schema, was the next thing that we did from there. Then the thing you'll probably want to change from there is your, in this case we're dealing with cats, the cat in find list.html file. if you recall, what this file does is it dictates what one of these list elements, looks like in our app. So let's say we've added a new attribute to our cat. So let's go here into our cat schema, and we'll say, oh, while we're at it, we're going to create a number of lives, right? We'll say num lives, and it's a number. So the minimum it can be is 0. And we'll, for kicks, we'll say the max is 9, just because I'm a nerd. So, okay, so we've got num lives right here that we've just added onto our schema. So, first of all, the thing we should be realizing is that, hey, our old cats don't have the num lives field on it, because they were added to the database at a time when our schema was different from the data that we were putting into our app, right? So what that means is all of these cats currently were created without the num lives field on it. So they kind of screw up how our app works by having their data mismatched like that. So my recommendation would be, whenever you do that, you're going to want to reset your program. So if you recall, to reset your Meteor app, you have to kill it. Then you have to do Meteor reset. All right, and then you can run Meteor again. All right, so now we don't have any cats anymore. So let's add a new cat. Fluffy, we'll say num lives is 7. We'll submit this. Interesting. It appears we have broken something on our app. We'll check the console. Error class. Access denied. I'm not logged in. So, yeah, we'll get to security rules at a later point, but something you may notice on the new program is that if you don't have, since I reset my database, we don't have a default admin account anymore, right? So we have to go make that again. Okay, now let's try that again. What's it called? I don't know. I can't think of Charles. I'm just like always struggling. Keep coming up with Fluffy for some reason. I need like better cat names. I'll type something in here. Submit. Okay, so here's Charles. Well, the first thing we'll notice, if we go back to this list of cats, it's not showing the number of lives that Charles has. That is unacceptable for how our program is going to work, we've decided. So to go fix that, we need to update how this template looks for the, cat in list template. So here I'll go to my templates under the collections folder, and I'll look up my cat in find list, right? Because when I say find list, what I'm really saying is like, the list of things we see here returned from like a find query, which returns multiple items. So, well, first of all, I'm going to delete this text I put in here from a previous video. Hello there. And then I want to put his lives on here really big. So let's put it in an H1. So I'll go here back to my template, and I'm going to throw in an H1, and then we'll just say this.numLives. All right, and there he is with his 6 lives. So now, when I click on Charles, this page also isn't showing the correct information. It's just showing the body and his name, but it's not giving me his number of lives. So let me go to the now, since we want to change something for find one cat, right? And again, these are still most of this core functionality, like showing what a like the lower level aspects of how the collection components work. Usually that's in the collections folder. The way to think about this is, oh, if it's going to look like this everywhere, it's probably in the collections folder. If it's just something specific to the one page, that's more of a page level thing. Now, the confusing part about that is it's definitely possible to have a page basically be nothing more than a container for one of these collection templates. That's just the reality of the situation. Sometimes you'll have pages that don't really add much on top of the default templates. Sometimes you'll have pages that add more, right? So I'll press pause on that concept for a second, though, and we'll return to it in a couple minutes. So just to finish working on the improving this find one cat page. So I'm going to say, well, now I want there to be let's say, so we'll just do like a full width column here, and we'll say I want the num lives. Oh, and we'll actually put that inside of an H1 while we're at it. So now when there it is. So now we should see the number of lives for that cat. So coming back here, what in the world did I just do? Well, we updated how one document looks in the list, right? And then from there, we updated how one doc looks by itself. I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this. So you know what I mean. When we're on the page, the template for looking at like the full document, however we want to display that, right? Which is different from this template. Now in this case, we had both of them just do the same thing where we just showed the lives inside of an H1 tag. But in this list, it might make more sense to show the number of lives in like an H5 tag, make it smaller and more out of the way. Maybe we don't want to show the number of lives in the list, and we only want to show that when they, maybe we should call this the expanded view of that document, right? Maybe that's the only place when they want to see the number of lives. So how that is kind of up to you. And probably one of the first things you do after changing your schema on a collection is you're going to go and change those two files. So maybe take a minute to play around with that. Keep in mind for both of these templates, the this context, which we'll go more into at a later point, is the current document that they're looking at in both of these, right? So for it, when they're in the find list, the this refers to whichever document the current iteration is. And whenever they're in the find one expanded view, this is still the same document. So we'll go about how that context is set at a later point. But you just need to remember, just like before, knowing the this keyword is really useful and important. And so the way to access attributes off of things is typically by using this is a mouthful. It's by using the this keyword. So take a minute to make sure you really understand what in the world just happened. We were just to recap one last time, we just changed this view and we changed this view because our schema had changed. So the structure of how our documents looked had changed. If you're confused about this, now would be the time to take a pause from the videos and talk to someone and make sure you're really understanding what's going on.